We need to treat marriage like it is a long-term investment. Hey guys, Jeff here with Men of God Ministries, and today I want to talk about marriage and how we should view and invest in our marriage. See, guys, we need to treat marriage like it is a long-term investment. It's something that we're going to continue to invest in so that it will pay us dividends and rewards greater than what we're investing into it. And we can't do that if we're not actually investing into our marriage. Let me start by saying this. A lot of people get into marriage and they treat it more like a checking account than they do an investment. And so let's just use that analogy. Let's run with it real quick so I can kind of set the stage for this. So when we treat our marriage like a checking account, we want to think of it like this. A lot of us, let's just say we got a paycheck at the end of the week, and let's just say it was $500. Well, what we do with that is we end up using up that $500 until it gets us to that next paycheck. And so we're looking to pay bills, or we're looking to utilize that $500 for what we need it for and just to get us through. And a lot of people will treat marriage the same way. They're treating it in a way of, I'm going to make a deposit on this marriage, and maybe that's a date night, maybe that's just time alone. It's something. But you're utilizing that deposit, and then unfortunately what happens is you put a deposit into that marriage, but now for the next week, the next 2 weeks, you're kind of just withdrawing. You're coming home, you're tired, and you're maybe from work or whatever's going on. You got stuff going on with the kids, but you're not in that week investing at all into your spouse, not investing at all into your marriage. You're just constantly taking withdrawals from that and not replenishing that on a daily basis. And so what happens is you get down to the end of that cycle and you're kind of living like you would paycheck to paycheck. You've taken out everything until you get to the very end, and you're hoping that what you had in that bank is going to carry you through until you get to that next paycheck. And unfortunately, we're treating marriage much the same way. We're putting in that deposit, and we're hoping that will carry us through until that opportunity. Maybe we have another date night, or we have another opportunity to make a deposit, but we'll continue to make withdrawals. Now, unfortunately, when we look at that as a checking account, just like you would get in trouble with your checking account, you start withdrawing too much, and you had that $500, you ran through it, but now you've got to take a little bit more out. So you're hit with what? Penalties and fees, and so you're hit with overdraft charges. And unfortunately, a lot of marriages are suffering the same way. They're putting in that deposit, but they're withdrawing more than what they could deposit into it. And so now you're kind of taking from your spouse. You're having to reap the deficiency, if you would, in that relationship. And with that comes that frustration, it comes arguments, fights, and the other person, your spouse, may be feeling like you're taking advantage of them because you're taking more than what you're putting into it. And so I just want to set that analogy because I do believe a lot of us, we're attacking marriage like it's a checking account, and we're withdrawing only what we're putting in, and at times we're withdrawing more than what we put in. Now, let's talk about one other thing. There are a lot of people living marriage like it's a credit line. In other words, they're doing absolutely nothing to deposit anything into their marriage. They're not investing. They're constantly living in a cycle of being behind. They're more in debt. So they're taking from their relationship on credit, hoping that one day we'll be able to pay it back. You'll see a lot of people do this, and they'll forsake investing in their marriage because they're just spending time with the kids. So all that time that could be invested and really improving the relationship, they're actually leaving that relationship to live on credit, and hopefully we'll pay it back later. Maybe when the kids leave, or when this happens or that happens, we have an opportunity. Maybe we'll be able to pay back into our relationship. Well, the problem is, as you know, you never get caught up when you're on credit. You're just constantly pulling from something that you don't even have. And so again, maybe you're forsaking time with your spouse because you're spending it elsewhere, and you're hoping on the backside you'll be able to make up all of that time. The problem is that time rarely comes, And when it does come, it's a little too late because you're already in a cycle that you're just trying to pay back something you pulled from that you didn't have. And so we really need to be careful that we do not treat our spouses and our marriage like they're a credit line. Like, hey, just understand I need to do this right now and I'll pay it back to you later. So now that I've laid that groundwork and talked about the different ways that a lot of people are treating marriage, let's talk about the way that we should be viewing marriage, the way that we should be attacking our marriage, and the way that we should be putting into our marriage. So the way we really need to look at our marriage, and I would encourage you to just stop and think about how you're operating in your marriage. And what we need to do is we need to think of this as a long-term investment. In other words, we're not thinking about it as a deposit, we're thinking about it as an investment. Now, what are we going to do to get our spouse, get our marriage to that next level, to that place where we actually have a surplus, where we can actually withdraw and we can take away from the marriage because there's surplus there to take away from. So we need to think about marriage as a long-term investment, kind of like a 401k or even a money market account, something that's going to make interest. So you're going to get more out of it than what you're putting into it. Now, how do we accomplish that in marriage? Well, we accomplish that by sowing things into our spouse that is really going to keep that on a level where they're going to constantly want to pay us back. They're going to constantly want to sow into us the way that we're sowing into them. Now, is that always going to be the case? Absolutely not. We know that with any type of investment account, sometimes we're going to get the returns that we want. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're actually going to take a loss. And in those moments, that's when you feel like you're investing, but you're not really getting out of the relationship what you feel like you're putting in. But that's where patience comes in. See, just like any investment account, when you're putting that money in, you're putting it in with the hopes and the belief and the faith that it's going to, even if I lost some this week, it's going to bounce back and I'm actually still going to make money. So maybe your spouse is having an off day, an off week, but that's where we give that patience and say, hey, I know I continue to invest in them and to invest in this marriage. It has to pay dividends, at least in the long run, if not just today. Okay. But we also know that marriage investment accounts, we know at times pays out much more than we put in, considering like stocks, and they've doubled. And there are going to be those times where you've put into your marriage not as much as they have, but you see this great reward. And it could be off something little. You thought it was something little. You invested into your spouse, that word that they just needed to hear. And man, they love on you and they give you much more than you thought you would get from that. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. Those little things. We need to be sowing into our marriage. We need to be doing those things that it takes to get our marriage through to the next day, to the next week, to the next month, and even on into the next year. So that's why we want to think of it as an investment account. You don't have an investment account just for the month. You're looking to invest into it for years. And that's the thing we need to be thinking about our marriage. Investing in our marriage. And so we need to invest love. We need to invest respect. We need to invest time. We need to invest talking each other's love language and making those deposits daily in looking for it to be an investment into the relationship. So let me encourage you. You certainly probably have time to get resources, if you would. There's resources you can be listening to on the way to work. And most of us are going to a job every day and we've got time in between. And the problem is we're not filling it with anything that's going to improve us in our relationship. The most important thing that we're actually using it to decompress, but in ways that aren't productive, in ways that are not going to improve the most important relationship that we have on this planet. And that's with our spouse. So let me encourage you today, take time to invest into your spouse. Come home, even if it costs you something, because we know it costs them to invest in something, but even if it costs you some time, some words, some opportunities, take that opportunity to sow into your spouse. And not really seeking a reward, just knowing that the more that you invest in them, the more that you're going to get a likely return. Let me also encourage you to invest in your marriage by seeking out resources, whether that's audiobooks or books or even retreats, those things that will help couples and help your marriage get to another level. Now, we can't get to that other level with our spouse if we're not doing anything to get us to that next level. So, again, you want to experience the best relationship for today, tomorrow, and on into the future, then I want to encourage you to take those steps. Really take a look at your marriage and ask yourself, what do I need to do? What do we need to do as a couple to invest in this thing long term so we can spend what we got into marriage for in the beginning, and that was to spend the rest of our lives together. Let us work on spending our lives together, sowing and getting those things that we need to get us to that next level and get us to the future, rather than living a life that we're withdrawing and we're living on credit. Because we all know, that when we're just borrowing on credit and when we're just borrowing, what happens is we get to a place where we feel like we can't borrow anymore, or we're not getting it back because we're just behind. And so what do? We think that we need to go find something else that will replace that. And unfortunately, that's what happens when couples are running at a deficit. They think, hey, I'm just going to let this debt go and I'm going to start with a brand new credit line. And that's not how marriage works. And you take that debt that you brought from the other relationship right into that one. So if we take time to invest in our marriage today, tomorrow, and into the future, we won't have to be worried about being in debt or paying out against what we haven't put in. So again, let me encourage you today, invest in your marriage. It's the most important thing that you will do, not only for you, but for your spouse and also for your kids that are watching.